The rain in Cotswold never truly stops. It just changes its rhythm. Sometimes it hums softly against the glass, like a lullaby only the lonely can hear. Other times it thrashes against the roof, as if trying to remind you that you are still alive. Today it was somewhere in between, gentle, persistent, and oddly comforting. I had moved back to this village 3 months ago. The house by the hill had been empty for years, but when the landlord said it still smelled faintly of lavender, I knew it was the one. There's something about lavender that always reminds me of her of Qingzhi. People here call me Peter now. It's easier that way. They think I'm just another stranger from the city, someone who left the noise behind to find quiet. Maybe they're right, but silence isn't always peace. Sometimes silence is just what remains after the words run out. Every morning, I walk down to the small bakery by the church. The old lady there, Mrs. Haywood, always asks if I'm writing something new. I nod even though my notebook has stayed blank for weeks. Words used to come to me like breath. Now they feel like glass shards lodged in my throat. It was raining harder when I saw her that morning. Or maybe it was just my mind playing tricks again. A girl in a beige trench coat, holding a pale blue umbrella, standing under the oak tree near the bridge. Her head tilted slightly, as if listening to something the rain was saying. She looked like Qingzhi, but it couldn't be her. She never liked the rain. I stood there, frozen, with a loaf of bread turning soggy in my hand. By the time I blinked, the bridge was empty. Just the sound of water, and my heart trying to remember how to beat. That night I opened my old journal, the one I promised never to touch again. The ink had faded, but her handwriting was still gentle, almost hesitant, like she had written each word with care. I traced the letters with my fingertip. If someday you forget me, I hope it's because you finally found peace. I closed the book before the page blurred. Outside, the rain began again, soft, endless, and full of memories I could never bury. The morning mist lingered longer than usual. It hung low over the hills, wrapping the village in a soft, silvery veil. I woke up to the sound of distant church bells, faint but steady, marking another quiet Sunday. The rain had stopped sometime during the night, leaving behind a world that smelled of wet earth and forgotten stories. I brewed coffee and opened the window. The scent of lavender drifted in again, faint but familiar, too familiar. There she was, across the narrow road by the old stone fence. The same beige coat, the same pale blue umbrella, closed this time, dangling loosely from her hand. She was looking at my house, or maybe through it. I froze, my coffee halfway to my lips. For a long second, the world seemed to hold its breath. She smiled. It wasn't the smile of someone who just recognized an old friend. It was the kind of smile that knew too much, gentle, distant, and heavy with something unspoken. I blinked, and she was gone again. Only the umbrella remained, leaning against the fence. By the time I ran outside, the road was empty, just a faint echo of footsteps fading toward the woods. The umbrella was real, though its handle cold, damp, and trembling slightly in my grasp. My heart did the same. That evening, I couldn't write. Every line I started turned into her name. I tried to paint instead, but the colors bled together until all that was left was a blur of blue and gray like rain over memory. Before I went to bed, I placed the umbrella by the window. The moonlight slid across its surface, and for a brief moment, I could almost see her reflection there, smiling again, softer this time. I whispered into the darkness, "Qingzhi, if you're still here, please don't disappear again." No one answered, but the wind brushed against the window pane as if to say, she had heard me. The village cafe sat quietly by the river, its windows fogged from the warmth inside. I went there often not for the coffee, but for the noise. The chatter, the clinking cups, the occasional laughter. It reminded me that the world still moved, even if I didn't. That morning, the rain returned, thin and silvery, sliding down the glass like threads of memory. I sat by the window, my notebook open, pen unmoving. Across the room, someone ordered tea in a soft, familiar tone. "Earl Grey, please. 2 sugars." My heart stilled. That voice had carried the same rhythm as her laughter, the same pause between words. When I turned, she was there, the girl from the hill, from the bridge. Her coat was draped over the chair, her hair slightly damp from the rain. She looked up, and our eyes met as if the years between us never happened. "Peter?" she said quietly. I didn't answer. The name felt foreign on her lips, like a borrowed memory. She smiled faintly. "You still don't like tea, do you?" My throat tightened. "You're not supposed to be here." Her eyes softened. "Neither are you." Silence hung between us, heavier than the rain outside. The air smelled of coffee and lavender, the scent I could never escape. She reached across the table, fingers almost brushing mine. "I came back because of the letters," she whispered. I froze. "Letters?" She nodded. "The ones you never sent." The world tilted slightly then. I could feel the ground beneath me shift, like reality had loosened its grip. Because I had burned those letters years ago. When I looked up again, she was gone. Only a cup of Earl Grey remained, steam curling like a ghost's breath into the gray morning. The night was colder than usual. The kind of cold that seeps through walls and bones, quiet but relentless. I sat by the fireplace, staring at the umbrella leaning against the window. It hadn't moved since that morning, yet every time I looked at it, I felt like it was watching me back. I opened the drawer where I kept the old journals. Most were blank, but one had a faint burn mark across the cover, the one I thought I destroyed. My fingers trembled as I opened it. There they were, the letters. Dozens of folded pages, ink faded to brown, the edges curled by time. I could still recognize my handwriting, uneven, impatient, desperate. The first one began simply, "Dear Qingzhi, today I watched the rain fall on your favorite window. It felt strange seeing it without you. The glass fogged up, but I didn't wipe it away. I think I wanted to pretend you were still there, drawing hearts with your finger like you used to." I stopped reading. My chest ached with something that felt both alive and long dead. Another letter slipped out, as if it wanted to be read. The ink had blurred at the end, but her name was still clear. "I forgive you." My breath caught. I never wrote that. I know I didn't. I flipped through the pages. Some were mine, others weren't. Different handwriting, softer strokes, careful punctuation. "Peter, if someday you read this, please don't look for me. I left because staying meant watching you fade away." My hand went cold, because those words, those were hers. I pressed my forehead against the paper, trying to smell the years that had passed, the ghost of lavender that still lingered. Outside, the rain began again, whispering against the window, soft as her voice. And then I heard it, a knock, gentle, deliberate. When I opened the door, no one was there. Only a single white envelope lay on the doorstep, sealed with a faint trace of perfume. I don't remember how long I stood there, staring at the envelope. The rain had softened to a mist, but the air was thick with the scent of wet grass and lavender. I picked it up carefully, afraid it would dissolve in my hands like everything else that once belonged to her. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Her handwriting slanted slightly to the right, each stroke carrying that same calm precision she had when she painted. It said only, "To the man who never stopped waiting." Inside, the paper was thin, almost translucent. The ink had bled in places, as though written through tears. "Peter, if you are reading this, I suppose I didn't do a good job of disappearing." I froze. "You once told me that love was supposed to be enough, but sometimes love becomes the very thing that drowns us." I watched you sink a little more each day into guilt, into silence, into the space between words. I wanted to pull you back, but every time I reached out, you drifted further. The words trembled across the page. When the doctor said your heart was failing, you laughed. You said you'd fix it later. I wanted to believe you. I wanted to believe that your heart could carry both of us. But I saw it, Peter. The hospital lights, the oxygen mask, your fingers still clutching that pen, even when you could barely breathe. My breath stopped somewhere in my throat. The fireplace crackled softly, like the world was trying to fill the silence she left behind. You told me not to cry, so I smiled instead. And when you fell asleep for the last time, I promised I'd keep that smile so you wouldn't be afraid. The last line was written differently, darker ink, heavier pressure. But you didn't die, Peter. I did. The room tilted, and the letter slipped from my hand. For a moment, I thought I could hear her voice in the wind-soft, apologetic, carrying the same warmth she always had when she called my name. "Qingzhi," I whispered into the emptiness, but only the rain answered. For days I couldn't bring myself to throw the letter away. It sat on my desk, folded neatly, as if still breathing. Every time I walked past it, the scent of lavender followed me, faint but alive. The same scent she used to wear when she painted by the window, humming songs in a language I never understood. The rain had stopped for once. The village was quiet, except for the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. I needed air, something real, something that wasn't wrapped in ghosts. I took the old trail behind my house, the one that led up the hill. The path was damp, the earth soft beneath my boots, and then I saw it. Lavender. The entire hillside was covered in it, wild, untrimmed, stretching toward the sky like waves frozen mid-motion. I didn't remember planting any of it. No one did. The landlord once told me nothing ever grew there, that the soil was too tired. But now it was alive. I walked into the field, brushing my hands along the blossoms. The scent surrounded me, gentle, overwhelming. And then I heard her voice. "You always said lavender feels like home." I turned sharply. There she was, barefoot, standing among the flowers. Her white dress fluttered in the wind, her hair catching the sunlight. She looked exactly as I remembered. No older, no colder. Just her. "Qingyi?" My voice cracked. "Are you real?" She smiled, the same smile that had haunted my dreams. "Does it matter?" I took a step closer, afraid she'd fade if I blinked. "You said you were gone." She tilted her head. "Maybe I am. Maybe you're the one who hasn't left yet." The wind blew between us, carrying her scent, her warmth, her ghost, and for the first time in years I didn't feel alone. When I reached out to touch her, my hand passed through the air, through sunlight, through memory. She looked down, a faint sadness in her eyes. "You kept waiting. That's why I'm still here." Then she leaned forward and whispered something I couldn't quite hear, something soft, something that felt like goodbye. Before I could ask her to stay, the wind shifted, and she was gone. But the lavender remained. It took me 3 days to find the courage to sit at my desk again. The house was silent, except for the faint ticking of the old clock and the rain beginning once more outside. The lavender field was still there, still blooming as if it had always been. But she hadn't appeared again. Maybe she didn't need to. The pen felt strange in my hand, heavier than I remembered. But this time I wasn't writing to fill the silence. I was writing to let it go. "Dear Qingzhi, I saw you again, at least I think I did. The hill was covered in lavender, and you stood there like time had never touched you. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I think I finally understood what you meant when you said leaving is another kind of staying. I kept waiting because I didn't know how to live without you. I told myself that remembering you was proof that love still existed. But maybe love isn't about remembering. It's about forgiving, even when the person you forgive is yourself. The rain still falls the same way it did when you left. But now I can hear its music again, not as grief but as rhythm, the sound of the world moving on. Thank you for staying long enough for me to say goodbye. With all the love that still lingers between raindrops, Peter." When I finished, I placed the letter on the windowsill. The ink hadn't dried yet, and the rain outside painted tiny silver trails down the glass. For a moment I thought I saw her reflection again smiling, her eyes gentle and full of quiet pride. The clock struck midnight. The wind carried the scent of lavender through the room, soft and warm. The letter fluttered once, then stilled, as if someone had read it. I whispered, "Good night, Qingzhi." And this time the silence that followed didn't hurt. Spring came quietly to the Cotswold Hills. The rain still visited often, but it no longer sounded like sorrow. It drummed lightly on the cobblestones, playful, alive. The lavender field had thinned, returning to earth for a season's rest. I didn't mind. Some things are beautiful because they don't last. I started helping at the local bookshop. It wasn't much, just sorting shelves, making tea for customers, listening to stories about people who had never left this town. It was strange, comforting. Ordinary felt new. One afternoon, after the rain, sunlight poured through the shop's window. The air smelled of wet stone and old paper. And then someone laughed. It was a soft, ringing laugh, young, clear, and for a fleeting second it made my heart skip. I looked up. A girl stood near the entrance, shaking the raindrops from her umbrella. Pale blue. For a moment I forgot to breathe. She caught me staring and smiled, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Sorry, did I interrupt?" Her accent was local, but her eyes carried something in echo I couldn't name. I shook my head. "Not at all." She wandered through the aisles, fingertips brushing the spines of books as if greeting old friends. "Do you work here?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly I just stay." She laughed again, the same warm sound. "Then maybe I'll stay too." When she left, she forgot her umbrella, pale blue just like hers. I stood by the door for a long while, holding it in my hand. Outside, the sky was clearing, the kind of light that made everything look new again. I set the umbrella by the window, beside the old letter, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted. I felt grateful, because somewhere between the raindrops, I had finally learned how to live again. They said she spent her final weeks in the small studio by the river. I never saw it while she was alive. I think part of me was afraid of what she had left behind, afraid of the truth I'd have to face. It was Mrs. Haywood, the baker, who told me about it months later. She used to sit by the window all day, she said, handing me a folded note she'd found among the letters Qingzhi never mailed. Always painting the same thing. Said it was for someone she couldn't reach. The key to the studio was still hanging by the door when I found it. Dust had settled over everything, but the air was thick with that same lavender scent hers, unmistakable. Light filtered through the tall windows, falling across unfinished canvases. Dozens of them, all of the same scene. A man standing on a hill, facing the rain. Each painting was slightly different. The sky, the light, the way the man held his hands, but it was always me. And in every one she had painted the same tiny detail. A pale blue umbrella, lying open on the ground beside him. I sat down, unable to move. The world felt too quiet for what it was showing me. On the table, there was one final letter addressed to Peter. The handwriting was shaky but graceful. "If you ever find this place, it means you finally stopped running from the rain. I wanted to paint you whole, not broken. That's why I drew you standing, even when I knew you were falling apart. I didn't want the last thing I left behind to be your pain." The doctor said the heart forgets pain first, but he was wrong. The heart remembers what love feels like. It's the mind that tries to forget. So if you ever stand in the rain again, don't hide from it. Let it fall. Let it wash you clean. Because in every drop, I'll still be there. I closed my eyes, and for a moment I could hear her laughter faint, like sunlight breaking through clouds. When I left the studio, I didn't lock the door. The wind followed me down the path, carrying the scent of paint, of lavender, of goodbye. A year passed, though it felt both longer and shorter than that. The house by the hill had changed, not in walls or color, but in air. The silence no longer echoed. It simply was. The lavender field had returned, a little wilder, a little freer, and the umbrella still leaned by the window, faded now to the color of morning fog. It was raining again. Not the stormy kind, but the soft, endless drizzle that had always belonged to this place. I stepped outside without a coat, feeling the cool drops slide down my skin. The earth smelled alive. The world no longer felt heavy. I walked up to the hill, the same one she had painted again and again. From there, I could see the village below, the church, the bookshop, the narrow road winding through mist. The sound of bells drifted faintly through the rain. I closed my eyes, and for a moment I thought I heard her voice. "You see? You finally stopped hiding." I smiled. "I think I just learned how to listen." The rain thickened, wrapping me in silver threads. Every drop that touched me felt like a memory returning home, not to haunt, but to rest. I whispered her name once, not as a plea this time, but as a Qingzhi. The wind brushed past, light and cool, and I could almost feel her fingers through it, not holding, not clinging, just passing gently by. And then there was nothing but the sound of rain, steady and calm. When I walked back down, I left the umbrella behind, open among the lavender, catching the falling rain.